Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. This is Trip on Two Wheels. I recently bought a 2004 Harley Davidson 1200 Sportster Roadster. Sight unseen from a friend of a friend who had kept it in their garage for the last 8 years underneath a tarp. It hadn't been started, it hadn't been ridden. I really didn't know much about what condition it was in, but I decided to take a gamble and paid $1,000 for it and another $400 for it to be delivered. It got delivered a couple of days ago, and I did a quick video on the delivery and kind of went over it to see what shape it was in, but I really did a really fast video. Now it's a few days later and I find myself with a little bit more time to go over this bike much closer and show you guys and myself what all is right with this bike, what's wrong with this bike, and what I'm going to have to do to get this thing back to where it needs to be. So the first thing you notice is we've got some discoloration here on the front forks. I don't really know what that is. That might come out with some mag polish. I'm really not sure. It doesn't look too bad. Obviously want to get that off to make it look good. Right up here we've got a little crease in the fender. This bike has been dropped twice, both on the left hand side and the right hand side. You can see paint, you can see crease. Not really important to get it running good or riding good, but maybe someday, in the looking good category, you need to take care of that. All over this bike, there's some slight rust on the chrome. A little quadruple aught steel wool ought to take care of most of that. You'll notice the brake lever, it's been dropped on that, it's curled really bad. Now this has to be replaced. The mirror right here, a little pitting in the chrome, not bad. That should polish out. You can tell where it was laid down. That doesn't bother me too much. Front right turn signal obviously needs to be tightened. Let's take a look at the ignition accessory. That all turns freely, no problem there. Same thing looks to be true with the fork locks. Key goes in, turns well. Now, one of the big things that's going to be important to look at is to take off this breather cover here to see if the carburetor intake is dirty or not, and to see how dirty the air filter is. If it's clean and the inside of the carburetor is clean, obviously that's a good sign. If it's not, well, you know what that means. A little bit of work. The tank looks really nice. The paint, there's no scratches, little smudges here. Those will buff out. The cap looks really nice. Take that off, let's look at it. Looks fresh, the rubber looks good. Look down into the tank. There's a little bit of surface rust inside that nozzle, but nothing bad. Now I'll tell you, my last video, I looked inside the tank and noticed there was just a small bit of rust flaking inside the tank. Just little minute parts. Still need to clean out the tank, but it really didn't look bad. I could smell gas in it, but I don't think there's much in it at all. Next up, let's take a look at the oil cover, and I apologize if you hear a train going by, but guess what? There is a train going by, and got a couple airplanes flying around overhead too, so sorry about that. Anyway, oil cover looks pretty good. No scratches or dents, maybe just some minor marks on it. The oil level dipstick pops out. It comes out. It's a little troublesome with this seat in the way. I've got to look into that, but I just took it out a couple minutes earlier when I had the seat off and looked down in it, and most of the oil is gone. Now that tells me one of two things. Number one, that all the oil has slowly dripped out over time, which would not be a good thing. Or number two, all of the oil has seeped down to the bottom of the engine and is staying down there, which is probably the better of the two options, unless it is congealed and is just one big rubbery blob, which I have heard of happening before. And of course, one of the first things I'll need to do to the bike is change the oil in the filter once I get going on it. Most everything does look pretty clean on the bike. You notice the grips, they've got a little bit of wear to them, not much, they just look old. The chrome for the most part looks good. I will tell you that I did go over this a little bit about an hour ago with some steel wool, but it looks pretty good. All of the foot pegs, it's got forward pegs, it's got mid pegs, and it's got passenger pegs. They all work real well. I did hit them with a little WD-40. The brake here, I'm no sporty expert, but they just don't seem to have enough play. The linkage is working, but I've got a feeling there might be some air in the lines. I might have to do a little brake work, bleed the brakes, etc. Obviously, I'm going to check and change the brake fluid as well. The heads look nice, no corrosion. Doesn't look like any rats have been chewing on any wiring or any rubber. That's a real positive. I don't know much about electrics at all. I'm certainly not what I would call a good mechanic. I'd say beginner to intermediate, to be honest with you. I can follow instructions pretty well, and I think I could fix just about anything on this bike, but electrics is something I really don't want to mess with. Cooling fins look good, engine cases, transmission case. Everything looks fairly tight, fairly clean. Let's go down and check the belt here. That seems to be about the right amount of play. Again, I'm no expert on Sportsters. I'll have to look more into that though, to be honest. The wheels look nice. Obviously the tires are old. They're probably original tires. They definitely need to be replaced before I ride this thing more than about 50 yards. I did find out that this lady owned a cat. Gosh, thanks a lot, cat. We've got some claw marks there, little pricks in the seat. not a real big deal. The seat pad looks really nice in good condition. The chrome here on the back on the sissy bar and the bracket looks good. Here's something that I didn't notice on the first go around. The license plate bracket is bent. Don't know how that got bent without the fender getting bent, and it also cracked the reflector. This definitely needs to be fixed. Okay, I don't know that I need a new one, and we certainly need to replace the reflector just for safety's sake. And the paint looks pretty good on the rear fender here. Just a little bit of tiny scratches here, nothing major. Everything looks really good with this rear taillight. Almost looks like it's been replaced. Coming around here, you'll see a bit more rust. I do know that the far side of the bike was the one leaning up against the garage wall, and this side of the bike was the one facing outward, where that cat that probably clawed the seat a little bit could pee on it. You can tell she laid it down on this side. We've got the left rear turn signal. It's either broken loose or popped out. I'm not sure, but it's scratched up. These are pretty cheap to replace. I think I'll do that. All right, let's take a look at the left-hand side of the bike. You'll notice, first off, the battery cover is missing. I probably do want to replace that. You don't have to, but it makes all the difference in the world on how the bike looks. The strap here, the battery strap, paint is flaking and it's rusted. Obviously, the battery is going to need to be replaced. Sitting there for 8 years, I can pretty much guarantee you that that thing won't hold a charge. All right, let's take a look at the brake fluid reservoir. This turns off pretty easy. It's actually the first time I've looked in here. Comes off. Let's look at the cap. Looks in good condition. Now this is a little concerning. The brake fluid is low and there's also some discoloration in there. Now I have pulled in on the front brake lever and pushed down on the rear brake pedal, and they do seem to be grabbing pretty well when I'm sitting on the bike and trying to move it forward or backward in neutral. So know the brakes are working, but it looks like certainly we've got to change the brake fluid and bleed the brakes as well. Look at the pegs on this side. They move freely, they're not scraped up. It's kind of weird how she dropped it and didn't beat these pegs up, or unless they were replaced, but they all move nicely. Another thing I'll need to do is replace the primary fluid, and there's the inspection hatch there. There's some like linkage that I need to check the play on. There's also a little gasket in there, and that's where the primary fluid goes. Now I've sat on the bike a little bit and I've worked through the gears with the clutch. They seem to be in fine working order. The one thing that is bothering me though is it is incredibly tough to make this thing budge. And I'm worried that the cylinders might be frozen in place. If that's the case, that's no bueno. But I think I know how to address that. We'll put a little Marvel mystery oil in the cylinders and work it around and get that down into the rings and the cylinder walls. The other thing that is an issue is these plugs are rusted in pretty darn good, and I tried putting a spark plug wrench on them and taking them out. I had to put quite a bit of force on them, couldn't get them to move. If you break off a spark plug in one of these cylinders, that's something I'm unable to deal with. That's gonna be a lot of money. So what I am gonna do is hit both of these plugs about half a dozen times with PB Blaster and let it set for maybe a day or two and see if that won't penetrate down in there and get those plugs loose. Other bit of bad news I have is the choke. If you notice, pull the choke out, it'll stay out, which is good, but you push it in, it wants to spring back a little bit. It's not too bad. What this normally is a sign of, if this is spongy or it's tough to move or doesn't want to stay, then your carburetor is all gunked up, which I suspect this bike's carburetor probably is after sitting for 8 years with bad gas in it. Let's take a look at the petcock here. That moves pretty freely. It's a little creaky. I'd really like to keep the Harley OEM petcock if I can. Here's where the petcock attaches onto the tank. I've tried moving that just a little bit with a 1-inch open box wrench. It does move easy. There's no rust under there. As you can see, it looks pretty nice. And then up under here, coming up from the petcock, is the fuel screen. And I am going to imagine that there will be rust particles or some sort of gunk trapped in that screen. Now, I imagine it's not going to be too bad because there's not a lot of rust in the tank, and supposedly this bike only has 900 miles on it. As soon as I get the battery in, we'll see pretty quickly if there's 900 miles on this bike or not. I'm going to fill this tank up with about 3.5 gallons, 4 gallons of vinegar. Let it set for 3 days. That should eat the rust out. Once that's done, I'll fill it back up with some water and baking soda to neutralize the acidity of the vinegar. You'll notice the fuel line going to the petcock down to the carb. It feels pretty supple and bendy, but again, it's probably been on the bike 16, 17 years. I probably need to replace this. And you'll notice Harley puts these ear clamps on here, which I can't stand. You have to take a cutting pliers and snip those off, and I want to replace those. Spark plug wires feel real bendy and supple. All the connectors are in place. I don't think that these have ever been changed. I do know that the bike was serviced once. They might have changed these, I don't know. You can see a bit of rust on the kickstand, or the Jiffy stand as Harley likes to call him. This one sounds really creaky when it goes up and down. I think it just needs a good lubing, and I'll try to get some of that rust off to make it look a little better. Now here's one thing I didn't notice when I first looked at the bike. Look at this chrome, just flaking off. Let's move up to the controls. All the buttons work and click and spring very well, no problem there. You'll notice here the mirror is loose. On the clutch lever, we've got a little bit of scraping. One of the bits of evidence that she put the bike down, along with some scraping down here on the engine guard. I did notice this on the first time I looked at the bike. That's not a big deal. The windshield is another thing. I don't know if I want to keep it on the bike or not. It's a sporty, it's not a touring bike. They're not really in the line of view. I'll either get rid of the windshield, I can get a new piece of plastic for it, or I can try to buff these out. So a lot of options there. You can see some scraping in the chrome on the mirror there. They still work though, no problem. Little rust pitting here on the turn signal. This thing is nice and tight though. And just like the other fork, a little bit of pitting in the chrome up here. Not too bad. I'll see if I can't get that out with some steel wool. But we've got this discoloration again. The front wheel, no problems there. Again, this tire has got to be changed. Not any rust on this disc. But yeah, we had rust on the back. That's interesting. Let's look up here at the instrument cluster. Everything looks good, no cracks. Everything looks, you know, pretty new. Got some chrome there that has a little bit of pitting, but again, steel wool, ought to take that right out. Good old made in USA. You don't see that much anymore. I love that. No cracks in the glass. Everything looks good up here. Brake cables, clutch cables, they all look pretty good. I don't anticipate having any major problems with those. Keep your fingers crossed, please. I think the major risks in this $1,000 Barn Find purchase are going to be the cylinders. Is there some sort of issue inside the jugs? I've got the concern of getting the spark plugs out. The choke is going to have to probably be replaced. I still need to pull that breather and air filter and look in the carb and see what's in there. I think the worst thing will be that I have to rekit the carb. I tell you what I'm going to do though, I'm going to try to get away from that. I think a carb kit's probably 40, 50 bucks if you get it from Harley, and I do want to get that from Harley. I'm thinking about running half a can of VP Fix-It fuel through it. I've heard a lot of good things about that product, and it is known to clean out carburetors, jets, and rejuvenate rubber pieces, etc. So before I break open that carburetor and rebuild it, I think I'm going to try the Fix-It fuel and keep my fingers crossed. So there's about as complete a tour of this bike and any potential issues that it might have that I can give you. Really now it's just a matter of digging into things and seeing what's broken, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. And as I told you in the last video, I'm going to turn this into a series. I really hope you subscribe to the channel and follow along with me on this project. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm not that good a wrencher. This bike's going to be a great learning experience for me. And also for those of you bikers that are pretty experienced and good wrenchers, this ought to be some great entertainment as I stub my toe and mess things up along the way. Anyhow, it ought to be a lot of fun. I really hope you'll join me. Please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Leave a comment if you want. Do you think I did good on this deal for $1,000 plus $400 shipping? Or do you think there's just too much risk here? Be sure and comment down in the section below the video. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, this is Trip on Two Wheels. Ride safe and ride often.